Welcome to Legacy Blueprint, Planet Forward, the podcast where top thought leaders in law, finance, and wealth planning come together to guide your future. Hosted by distinguished estate planning attorney Mike Bascom, each episode highlights industry experts who bring clarity, innovation, and proven strategies to the table. Because building a legacy isn't a solo act, it's the result of a team of professionals working in harmony. Join us weekly as we showcase the leaders shaping tomorrow and give you the tools to plan with confidence today.
Welcome to Legacy Blueprint, Planet Forward. I'm your host, Mike Bascom. Today's guest is David Kleinhandler, a visionary entrepreneur, InsureTech pioneer, and founder of multiple companies that have transformed the way high net worth individuals plan their financial legacies. With over 35 years worth of experience and a straight PhD in growth, David brings a rare mix of raw insight, strategic foresight, and human connection to the world of wealth planning. How are you doing today, David?
I am well, Mike. Thank you for that fabulous introduction. I might have to hire you as my PR agent going forward.
We're excited to have you with us today. We love having key thought leaders, so we're so pleased to have you join us today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
So, David, you've had a pretty remarkable career, starting off in Bronx, and you've grown it to national prominence. Can you share a little bit about your personal journey and what drew you into the world of life insurance and wealth planning?
It's really fascinating. My best friend's dad was a life insurance salesman, and I watched him as a young kid, and I learned from him the value of life insurance. I remember one of the first stories ever shared with me that he was working with a family, and unfortunately the husband died early and they had to deliver, a death check. And he said to me at the end of the day, it really saved the family's life. And then I started asking lots of questions, and I was fascinated how life insurance worked.
Very interesting. You can really impact lives when you deliver that check. I'm sure you've seen many instances where it's had profound impact.
Yeah, one of my first opportunities in the business, Mike, I was working with an investment banker, and I ended up selling him a very large disability policy and life insurance policy. And we put a rider in his life policy that in the event he became disabled, premiums would be paid. And also he had a very large disability policy. And we put a cost of living adjustment of 4% on the policy. Within 3 months of buying the policy, he slipped, broke his back in a way that he could never work again as a banker. And he had what was called an own occupation clause. And by having that clause in the policy, he has collected $25,000 per month plus a 4% cost of living adjustment. And that was one of the first policies I sold. Wow, that was in 1987. Wow. So that goes back, been in this industry 38 years now. And if you just do the math, he's collecting a little over $100,000 a month. Plus he had a very large life insurance policy that they're still paying the premiums on. So when you understand the value that you're going to bring to someone's family or business or charity, it's just about giving back. I'm always a giver. I think of myself as a servant leader. And the way I approach business is I want to put the oxygen mask on first so I can breathe. Mm-hmm. And then I can bring critical thinking to people, Mike. That's how I approach my business.
Very interesting. Now you're joining us on a Georgia-based podcast. What ties or connections do you have to Georgia, and how has that influenced your personal and professional life?
Well, I will tell you, I've been to a lot of amazing basketball games at the Georgia Dome, at the Mercedes Dome as well. And I've always been fascinated by Atlanta and Georgia and Buckhead, and just really understanding the people down there and how generous and nice people are. And I will root for the Georgia Bulldogs, except against Alabama, but we can't. Maybe I should have said that. I'll root for the Georgia Bulldogs, period. But I'm just a big SEC guy, and I've always liked, going to big games down in Atlanta, and it always feels like you're there with great people.
I know you got ties to Syracuse. I would not have associated you necessarily with the evil school from from the West.
Well, no, the funny thing is our head coach at Syracuse is Fran Brown, and he was the quarterbacks coach, I believe, at Georgia. So that, it's additional ties into the SEC as well.
David, you've often talked about earning your PhD on the streets, poor, hungry, and driven.
Yep.
How did that mindset shape your entrepreneurial path and how you approach success today?
I really like the question, Mike, and it really goes back to when I was 12 years old and parents divorced when we were young. And, in today's age, I would have had a debit card for food stamps, but my mother always would send me to the grocery store to buy groceries. And I'll never forget when I walked into the grocery store that day, I was fascinated by the $3 bill inside the food stamp package. And I got to the front of the line, put my groceries up, got them rang through, and I asked the clerk, "Can you tell me what this represents?" And the manager yelled, "You're poor." And I yelled back at him. I said, "No, I'm rich." And I walked out of the grocery store really upset. And I made a decision that in life, I was going to lead myself to where I needed to get to. I always knew I had something different about myself in terms of how I thought about life. I never knew we were poor. I never knew that. I will share with you, if you ever invite me to your home for dinner and you deserve to serve me an omelet or eggs, I'm going to get up very politely and leave. So I told my wife, if she ever decides to serve eggs for dinner, I quit and I will leave. Thank God in 29 years, she hasn't done that yet. But the mindset was developed then, Mike. I always said that if it's going to be, it's up to me. And I always had that mindset to win at the highest level. So if I ever put the time in, I'm going to exceed at the highest level because it's about learning. And I use these words, ABL, always be learning, always be listening, always be counseling. And I got lucky in life. I met East Greenberg, the very famous Bear Stearns CEO, and had lunch with him early in my career. And he had a mindset called PSD, poor, smart, and driven. And he would rather hire someone poor, smart, and driven than an MBA. So I took what he did and I created the PhD from UCLA, the P for poor, the H for hungry, the D for driven, from the University corner of Lexington Avenue. And that's always been my mindset, Mike.
Well, from omelets to the Kleinhandler Corporation is quite a step. I do think that omelets, though, are now considered a superfood. So you may rethink your thought about.
Yeah, maybe. I wouldn't be so against maybe having an omelet for dinner, but we'll leave that I'll have to figure that out on my own.
Well, you, like I mentioned, you have formed the Kleinhandler Corporation about 3 decades ago, as I believe, serving primarily high net worth individuals. What did you see in the market at that time that others were missing?
Well, it's a really interesting story because I wanted to raise a lot of money for this venture, Mike. And I had the idea that I could be in the direct mail business. And I was very fortunate that I learned the direct mail business by watching American Express. And people would laugh at me. They're like, it's never going to work. And that's when I knew I had a great opportunity in front of me. When anyone ever tells you something is not a good idea and they've not explored it, that means I got to go explore it. Because I live like a 5-year-old. I'm very intellectually curious and I'm very fascinated by asking lots of questions. So I just turned the ripe old age of 62. So I tell people I'm 5 years old with 57 years of experience. And my mindset is that if you believe in something, and I always knew when you work with that high net worth, ultra high net worth family, you always have to think about defensive strategies. And to me, understanding how life insurance works, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, Mike Tyson said. But my mindset was that we use this word holistic, and it's the intersection of wealth and, the insurance world. But what I viewed was life insurance is a very important asset class if it's understood correctly. And I said, if I could create advice the right way and then center it to help people understand it's probably one of the most valuable assets. I'm going to win at a very high level.
Now, there's some fairly prominent people, one particular nationally known person who badmouths life insurance, particularly permanent insurance, I think because they only see it as a death benefit vehicle. What do you see beyond that?
Well, if people understood that the U.S. consumer balance sheet, the financial assets of the balance sheet, is made up of 16% cash value life insurance. It's the living benefits. It's the tax deferral. It's the ability to take income out tax-free. These products have been designed, they're very complicated, they're opaque, and they're complex. But if you unpack them the right way and use best-in-class theory around this, I could prove to you that the math works out. But it's the way these products are designed. And that's why when I won at the highest level, I'm a math guy. So I started to unpack the math. And when you understand what the balance sheet is telling you, that the sophisticated and the ultra rich understand this, it's really demystifying something for that high net worth and ultra high net worth.
Interesting. Very interesting. Now you're with Optofino and you're leading an InsureTech revolution. What inspired you to launch this platform, and what makes it so transformative for advisors and clients alike?
Well, let me unpack that, Mike. And I want to just take you through two quick storyboards of how this whole thing came about. It's a little over 3.5 years ago. I got two really interesting phone calls, and there was no aftercare in the life insurance business. 84-year-old friend away in Europe for 8 weeks. His assistant is out sick with long COVID. He comes home in the mail. It's the snail mail. He has all these lapse notices of his policies. If he would have called me on day 61, it would have been fait accompli because he's uninsurable, and the policies would have ended up in the cutting room floor. I was able to get the policies back in force, and I recognized that there was zero aftercare in the marketplace. I just checked the box and I went back to what I was doing, Mike, because I'm a private equity venture investor and an angel investor. And then the next call set this whole thing up. For whatever reason, it collided because in 2008, I exited my business in a very healthy way. And my friend calls me up, David, I'm getting ready to buy life insurance. I'm not sure the structure is right. Now, the life insurance industry is very fragmented. The distribution model is controlled 48% by captives. That's the Northwest Mutuals, the Mass Mutuals, the Guardians, the Penn Mutuals of the world. And then 52% is independent. But he was being pitched by a captive person who was trying to sell him a product for protection when he was buying an accumulation product. It sent shivers down my spine. I unpacked it for him. He called me up as an expert. He says, David, I only trust you. Help me understand what the agent's representing here. And I said, what the agent's representing is complexity. What the agent's representing is not the right product set for you. So I gave him very copious notes. And then I called one of my dear friends in the industry to have him put numbers together. And I put a side-by-side comparison. He calls me back because he's a technology guy. He said, David, how come this does not exist? These visualization tools to be able to analyze policies in real time. And then why isn't there a marketplace with all the top carriers to be able to look across the moat to understand how these products work? And I'm like, I don't know why. And then I started to unpack and I got to the core and I'm like, oh my God, no one has built this. And I figured out why. Because a lot of products are very easy to aggregate when it's simplicity. But when you have these products that have a lot of complexity, it takes a village. So I put together a village, Mike, and I built a very robust platform to address all of these issues and more. And we also built, because the aftercare was near and dear to me, is the ability to manage someone's policy, because life insurance is not linear. It's real world. There's interest rate risk, there's investment rate risk, there's cost of insurance risk, and there's also carrier risk. So I said I could build these models in my sleep because I had spent, the prior 14 years investing in tech. So I put together a village to be able to build Optofino. And the reason for the name of Optofino, just quickly, Mike, is optimized for Opti, Fino for finance. And I'll tell you, Portofino is like luxury. So that's how we thought about the brand.
I like it. Simplifying life insurance can be a huge burden. So being able to do that, I saw on your website, you guys do some AI-driven case design as well. Clearly looking towards the future with what you're doing there. How do you see technology reshaping the role of financial advisors over the next decade or so?
See, I really believe the North Star to the life insurance industry is going to move to the financial advisor. Let's just kind of unpack the life insurance industry today. 50% of the industry is going to either retire or die over the next 5 to 15 years. So a lot of the prominent players are going to exit the business. And there's a bigger problem going on. 80% of Newark fails out. So what I started to think about building Optofino was to build uniformity, go to each and every carrier to build best-in-class designs. So when you're selling insurance, it's all uniform. So I always say a human with tech creates bionics. So that's how I thought about Optofino from a scaling perspective. I'm actually giving you intel in the box, and we're using a lot of AI tools. And we got incredibly lucky because if this build was 10 years ago, it probably would cost me $25 million to build the build. And we got lucky with a lot of tools, OpenAI, Perplexity, Canva, and many other tools that we're using to be able to parse these data sets and then plug into the carriers, into their APIs, or get direct feeds in. So we've been very blessed to be able to get lucky, but I see where the puck was moving. And if you look at the intersection and we talk about the word holistic, I go back to that again. The whole mindset is that you got to make sure you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. And we have such a big opportunity. There's amazing stats that 83% of wealthy advisors are asking for life insurance advice and only 14% are getting it. 83% are asking for long-term care advice and only 12% are getting it. So to me, it's if you could build this one, I like to think of this almost like a one-click system that it will help you do not only case design, it will do the pre-underwriting and the analytics, because we've taken every insurance carrier's manual from an underwriting perspective to be able to pull the data in. And then we think from a bespoke and customized approach, we want to be able to learn what the advisor is trying to solve for the client. And the areas that we focus in is we first talk about longevity and understand what those risks are. And we try to understand, the family dynamic, if, the grandparents and the parents, and try to start to unpack that so we can understand, is there an accumulation need there? Then the next step is really understanding long-term care and medical costs and unpacking that from experience. If you haven't experienced long-term care, you're probably not going to buy the product. Then the third area is creating, legacy and certainty. And I like to think about the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. The Rockefellers built multi-generational wealth, and the Vanderbilts didn't think it through the right way. So it's also about structuring. And then you want to talk about taxes. Are you a small business owner? Are you aware of all the different opportunities? Because I believe the problem in the marketplace for both attorneys and accountants is they take a very reactive approach. So we like to be very proactive, and we'll think about defined benefit pension plans and different things where you can put a lot more contribution away. And then you look at philanthropy and you try to understand, what the goals there are. And then the last piece is really building structure. If a family office is running this, you got to make sure they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's, and they're looking at it from all perspectives. So I'm building out little vignettes right now to be able to address all these different things in a box. And it's also about how you have the conversation with people, Mike, because you got to unpack, What's your purpose in life? How do you want to be remembered? Who are the most important people in your life? How do you view money and how do you want to use it? And then that starts to build the springboard. I'm on the board of advisors at the University of Texas in the McCombs Business School, and it's called the Wealth Management Center. My friend John Langston is like the big donor, and I sit on the advisory board, and it's really reshaping the conversation.
That's very interesting. I know that you've worked with lots of ultra high wealthy clients. You've generated probably over 5 billion in sales. When you talk about bespoke solutions, that's fantastic for those folks. What about just your more run-of-the-mill average person? What are some universal lessons about wealth and legacy that would apply to anybody at basically any financial level?
I say you got to first build a blueprint for your life. I don't care if you're worth 500,000 or 5 billion, it doesn't matter. You need a blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
You need to build for that next generation. And this is just my belief that you need to talk to your children. You need to explain to them how money works. You need to show them the path. You need to get them to understand that life is complicated. And I don't care how much wealth you have. It's also about values and not your valuables. So if you could pass on some of these lessons and teach your children and grandchildren, I don't care what the wealth is, because the truth is it's about the values. How do you want to be remembered is the real question. And I think about Muhammad Ali as the perfect example of being a servant leader. And on his tombstone, it speaks to that ilk. So I think it's more of the values conversation. And to me, if I could take all the lessons I've learned from ultra high net worth and demystify it downstream, everyone has the same opportunity. They could pass their wealth on. And we talk about this great wealth transfer happening. There might be the great wealth transfer fake out, Mike, because there's going to be things around longevity, long-term care and medical costs. We also don't include women in the conversation enough. I go to these meetups and these conferences, and it's 90% men, 10% women. And I'm really wondering, because I have 3 daughters and you have 3 daughters, we got to show up for them. Mm-hmm. So it's also 38% of all wealth will be controlled by women in 2030 and beyond. But another key point is really understanding, if you want to win this game, you better get mom on board, because if you get mom on board, you can get next gen and the third gen as well.
Interesting, very interesting. You talked a lot about values, and I know some of yours. You talk about growth and well-being, mindful action, and giving. Those are deeply integrated into your business approach. How do you instill these principles into the companies that you lead? I know you're a serial entrepreneur as well.
You try to lead by example, Mike, and I think that's really important. It's about the conversations you're having. It's about the interactions you're having with people. You want them to see through the lens that you're always, and I'll give you a perfect storyboard, because this is one of the greatest eulogies I've ever heard. And it's from my friend Ed Down, who was a Forbes 400 guy, and Dick Schaap, who's a very famous sportscaster who Ed was best friends with. Very close to your friends. And unfortunately, Dick died. It was either hip replacement or a knee replacement. And unfortunately, he didn't get off the table. And at his funeral, Ed got up and said that Dick was a friend behind your back. So that's the way, look, to me, it's always about communication and communication style. Mm-hmm. And if you're not happy with someone, you got to go to them and talk to them. And I always believe that if you talk to them, at least you can get aligned with them. You should never make a mess on the other side, because people don't want to hear the BS. So I'm always about, if I have a problem, I'm coming to you. It's about communication. It's about trying to elevate your game and also showing people that you care, and then it's actually going that extra mile. Like, I'm willing to do things that other people are not willing to do.
Interesting. I love that. You've also served, you've owned multiple sports franchises, and I know you've served on various entrepreneurial boards. So about your experience outside of finance, how has that shaped your leadership style?
It's really learning from others, Mike. It doesn't matter where you are. I'm reading a friend's book right now. My friend Mark Roberts was a massive sports agent. We're actually partners in business. We're working on something together right now. And it's like listening. To me, the key to everything is being aware that you don't know everything, being aware that you're open to being you. I like to think of myself having the creative mindset. I used to have a fixed mindset where it was very closed. And I woke up one day and I'm like, it's not serving its purpose. And I had more of a scarcity mindset. So I had to create an abundant mindset. And that was not an easy task to do because I ran my first business on the fear of failure. I didn't do it out of love. And I learned a lot from looking through that lens and then trying to understand whatever I'm going to do in my life. I've got to make sure that I'm listening, I'm being thoughtful, I'm critically thinking at all times, and I'm being aware of my surroundings. Because sometimes you don't know who you're in the room with and who's going to change your life. And that's why God gave me 2 ears for a reason.
Well, you are a connector by nature, and I know you love basketball, and a large part of basketball is sharing the basketball, at least if you want to be on a successful team.
Yep,
And
100%.
lift others up. So why is community building such a core part of your legacy?
It's interesting. So I'm going back through the last 3 years of text messages and emails, and I'm looking at these conversations. I started doing it today, and it's really fascinating how you have this very robust network of people, and you never have a dull moment. So it's really fascinating. I'm a collector of friends. Look, I'll start everyone out with a grade of a C because if you go up, that means we're trajecting up and I'll keep you in my network. If you stay at a C, not so sure I'm going to keep you around. And if you go down, then I have to eliminate you. But to me, about community is about helping people. It's about driving a message across to people because this to me is the key. Everything I stand for, Mike, everything I believe in, I want to help the other. My good friend, who's the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, wrote a book called The Other Wes Moore. And I think about Wes as a giver. I think about Wes as about the other. It was never about Wes. It was always about the other. And I sit and I think about that every day because I always say if you get one domino to fall, there's a million that sit behind it. So that's about community. It's about asking thoughtful questions. It's about engaging in thoughtful conversation. I don't like talking to people about, sports or the news. Let's go into who you are. What are your values? What do you stand for? Because then I want to be around you. And if not, then so be it.
Well, it's clear from your energy. You still got a ways to go. You're not done yet.
Well, remember what I said before, Mike. I'm 5 years old with 57 years of experience.
I love that. I love that. I may steal that.
You own it now. It was yours. I do not have any pen or authorship to it.
Awesome. So you've had a varied career. Looking back, what has been the biggest pain point or challenge in your career, and how did you grow from it?
Oh, Mike, that question I'm always answering. I like to play chess while everyone's playing checkers. I'm always a lot of moves ahead of you, and I could see the field. I've been very lucky to have vision to be able to see where the puck is moving. And I've been blessed with this my whole life. I don't know where it came from. I think about my parents. My mom was the ultimate caregiver. My dad, we have respect for, but I'll leave that at that. And I just got lucky that I could see through the forest, through the trees. And to me, that's what it's about. It's about really trying to be mindful. It's about really trying to hug life because we only have one life to live, and it better be my best version of me.
I like it. So for our listeners who are building their own legacy, what's one actionable step they can take today to move from stuck to unstoppable?
Wow, that's a good one. And I'm going to share something from a book I just read, Mel Robbins, Let Them. And she wrote another book that I did not read. But Mel was in a lot of pain, and she was laying in her bed, and she just made a decision that morning because she had a serious bout of depression. I'm going to get up and I'm going to go at it. I don't care. Look, this is something I share with everyone. In order for you to win at the highest level, you have to get uncomfortable to get comfortable. I always tell people, run towards your fear. And I'll share a story that changed my whole life. And this is a story that a buddy of mine calls me up. I think it's about 25 years ago. He says, David, meet me at the cemetery 6 a.m. in the morning. And I want to take you to 2 grave sites. And I'm like, dude, you're delusional. But I agree to meet him. And we go to the first grave site, and he tells me this amazing story about this gentleman who happened to be his grandfather. And his grandfather accomplished everything in life. And with 5 days to go in his life, he sat with his family. There was a lot of love. There was a lot of respect. There was 0 regrets. I said, amazing. Then we go to the next grave site, and he starts to tell me a story about this other person. And he said, this guy 5 days before he died had so many regrets that he didn't do what he wanted to do. And it was his uncle. And I sat there at breakfast a half an hour later, and I asked him, why did you take me? He said, David, you have something that people don't have. You have this way of doing things that people want to be around you because they love your infectious energy, and you're not using it right. And you're living in a little bit of fear. And this is when I'm building my first business, Mike. And I was afraid. I had 2 businesses. I had the Kleinhandler Corporation. It was called David Kleinhandler and Associates. And then I had another business called Quotemaster USA, which was a term life quoting engine with advice. And I built those 2 businesses. One was out of fear. The other was out of love. And I kind of then started to hear what he had to say. So to me, run towards your fears, embrace them, hug them, own them, and don't be afraid to take the leap. Because the worst thing that happens is you're going to fall down and scrape your knee. Get back up. And my favorite quote in life is the Teddy Roosevelt quote, the man in the arena. You could be scarred and marred with sawdust and bloodied, but as long as you get up to continue to fight, you cannot lose. Don't ever give up. That Jim Valvano's greatest line from the 1983 NCC team. And I've had the pleasure of being dear friends with the point guard from that team, Derek Wittenberg. He told me it was a pass, but we know goddamn well that was a shot. And if Akeem would have realized it was going to come down, he would have grabbed it out of the air, and Lorenzo Charles would never have made the dunk, and they would never have won the national title. So to me, don't be afraid. If you're going to fail fast, but fail forward also.
I love it. I love it. Appreciate it. Hey, thank you so much, David, for sharing your journey, your insights. We got a lawnmower right outside my window, so hang on just one second. David, thank you so much for sharing your energy and your insights and your journey with us. For our listeners, how can they find you?
They could easily find me at David at Optofino, OPTIFINO.com. I am open to helping people think out loud. I really truly believe life is a journey. I think you got to stop thinking about life as a sprint. Think of it as a marathon. Put the time in. I always ask people this question. Do you want to be the 3-minute person, the 30-minute person, the 3-month person, the 3-year person, or the 30-year person? I used to say it to men. Do you want to be the 3-minute man? But now I have to be neutral. But it's about changing the landscape. Don't be afraid of fear. And by the way, I wear these bracelets. One says, let it be. One's family ties. One's gratitude. And 2 just broke. One is balance and one is breathe. Just breathe and you're going to find your way. And don't be afraid of the outcome.
I love it. We'll put your connection down in the description below. And thanks again, David, for your time. This is Mike Bascom reminding you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with someone building their own legacy. And as always, thank you for joining us on Legacy Blueprint, Plan It Forward. We'll see you next time.
That concludes today's episode of Legacy Blueprint, Plan It Forward with Mike Bascom. Each week, we bring you insights from thought leaders across law, finance, and wealth planning. Because building your legacy is never a one-person journey. It takes a team of dedicated professionals working in harmony to turn vision into achievement. If you're ready to take the next step toward your secure future, visit bascomlaw.com or call 77028559493. And don't forget to tune in again next week as we highlight more experts and strategies to help you plan it forward with confidence.